Shalom Nekulam. Hope you're doing well. Hope your week was great. Sending blessings from the land of Israel. Getting ready for Shabbat. I'm going to share a thought in this week's Torah portion on Parshat Balotecha, the Rising Up Parsha. Among the many amazing things that we learned from this week's Torah portion, I want to focus on one thing, that's the journeys of the Jewish people. And most people are very familiar with the fact that the Jews wandered through the desert for 40 years before they got to the land of Israel. But what did those journeys look like? Where did they go? How did they know where to go? What was the map of their journeys? And the Torah actually speaks about it, in terms of how they traveled. And in this week's Torah portion, it describes something very miraculous and also something very beautiful, that the Jewish people were led through the midbar, through the wilderness, through the desert, by an amud anan, a pillar of cloud. And this cloud was clearly the representation of God's will and desire for the Jewish people, where they should go and where it was the best for them to go. But the Jews simply needed to follow. Right? It was on some level a test of faith. Right? If they could hear God's voice and follow God's voice, again, kind of emanating out of that cloud, right, in terms of where to go. And we learned something very interesting, that sometimes the cloud would be in a place for years. Right? The Torah says when the cloud would rise up and move, so the Jewish people would break down their camp and they would start to move in the wilderness until the cloud rested. And where the cloud rested and when the cloud rested, the Jewish people would as well. And they would stay in that one place until again the cloud moved once again. And as I was saying before, that sometimes the cloud would be there for years in one place, and they would stay in there years. Right? And other times they'd be there for just a few days. And they never knew. They never knew coming to a place how long they would be there, which could be frustrating, which could be challenging. You unpack all your personal stuff, you unpack all the communal, belongings of the Mishkan, the traveling sanctuary that they had with him in the midbar, and you have no idea if the very next day you're going to have to pack up again. And it's very interesting because Nachmanides, Ramban, actually brings down that there were times when they got to a place and the very next morning they were packing up again because the cloud moved. They had no idea. There are some times also where they got to a place that was so beautiful, wow, I hope we get to stay here for years, and they only stayed there for a short period of time. And as well the opposite. They got to a place where it doesn't seem like this is such a fitting place for us to be for a long period of time. Hopefully we'll move quickly, but they didn't. They stayed there for a long period of time. And it's a very interesting thing because the Baal Shem Tov brings down in a future Parsha that the 42 stops along the journey of the Jewish people in the wilderness, in the desert, are really a spiritual map for the 42 journeys of every single Jew in the world, of every single person. And the journeys of the Jews in the Midbar are a metaphor on some level, on a very real, deep level for our lives. And just what we said just now, the metaphor is so strong. Sometimes, throughout our lives, maybe less so when we're younger, but more as we get older, and as we consciously choose our own way, we're changing locations. Sometimes rapidly, sometimes not so rapidly. Sometimes we get to a place and we're there for years. Sometimes we get to a new place and we're only there for a few days. Sometimes a few hours. And sometimes we wonder why. And the teaching, I believe, of this parsha, of this Torah portion, is saying that in each place that we go, there's a reason for us to be there. There's something that we need to do. There's something that we need to learn. There's some person maybe that we need to meet, right, to add to our life experience and take that experience with us along the way. Every place we go, it's not random. Reb Shlomo Carlebach says, you think you get lost, you're driving somewhere and you got totally lost. Know that you got lost for a reason, that the place that you didn't think you were going to go to, but now you find yourself in, you're meant to be there. There's something you're supposed to learn, some kind of spiritual fixing, something, right? And again, the journeys of our lives. Sometimes we have to leave a place, we don't want to leave that place, but we go to the next place and we realize maybe, now it makes sense to me. Now it makes sense to me why I need to leave that place, because clearly there's something I needed to do or learn here. And even if it's not so clear right away, even if we don't understand quickly why it is we're moving from place to place, just having the understanding, the wisdom, the awareness, right? Even the faith that is what's kind of underlying all of our journeys in life, adds tremendous strength, value, understanding, wisdom to our lives. Right? Just to kind of cap off this teaching with the teaching from the Kutei Moran, the teachings of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, One of the last teachings of the whole Sefer of the Kutei Moran, the second to last teaching, actually illustrates this point very well. It's brought down that Rabbi Nachman taught that sometimes a person will have a spiritual thought, a spiritual enlightening thought, a spiritual awakening thought, inspiring thought in a certain place. And it's not random that it's happening in that place, Rabbi Nachman teaches. In fact, he teaches the person shouldn't leave that place until he's kind of done with that thought. He's like explored and expressed and really grasped that thought completely. Because if he or she moves too quickly, he can lose it. She can lose it. Right? And then it just kind of ends this teaching with a little story, a little glimpse in Rabbi Nachman's life, that there are times that he would be in his house and all of a sudden he would stop. In the middle of the house, he'd just stop. And from that point where he stopped, he started teaching all these inspiring spiritual teachings. And he wouldn't move from that place until he was fully done expressing himself. Because he knew, right, with his deep understanding of reality, that in this place, like this little, square foot of place, is where this teaching is coming down, is where I'm accessing this teaching. Over there, just a few feet away, I'm not going to access it. Right, big stuff, right, on the macro and on the micro, right, where we go, right, every journey we take, every new place that we get to, even the steps we take, Rabbi Nachman is teaching us, right, are all happening for a reason, all bringing us to places that we need to be. So I want to bless you, I want to bless me, that we all should journey through this life with health and happiness, and know that everywhere we go, right, everywhere we go, there's something there for us to know, right, something there to add to our life experience, right, until we move on to the next place, whether that's after a few days or after a few years. Sending lots of love and blessing from the land of Israel. Shabbat Shalom.